So it's my brother right here. It's my brother Tad Bartlett who's going to be the moderator. I shouldn't be talking yet.
No, you shouldn't. This is my brother, Maurice Carlos Ruffin. Is this thing on? Can y'all hear me?
Is it?
Okay, good.
Okay.
What y'all don't know, aside from We Cast a Shadow, The Ones Who Don't Say They Love You, and The American Daughters, is that Maurice Carlos Ruffin is also the acclaimed novelist of a novel called City of No. Does this bring you back a little bit?
Oh, those are bad times. No, it's good.
Okay.
Yeah, it's good.
No. So I've had the privilege of knowing Maurice now for 18 years. In 2005, we were both writers who had fallen into the trap of being lawyers. And I met Maurice in a conference room after a bar association meeting where somehow it had come to either his attention or my attention that the other one was a writer. And Maurice, being Maurice, always in search of community, came up to me and said, I hear you're trying to write a novel. I'm working on a novel. Why don't we workshop them? And so at that moment, prior to that moment, he was a stranger to me. But at that moment, and ever since, he's been my best friend. And we workshopped one really terrible novel and one incredible novel called The City of No, about a group of misfit superheroes, mutants.
The MCU just stole my whole thing.
They did. Well, that leads me to my first question, and that is MCU or DC, and why?
You're trying to start a fight here. But first of all, thanks for trying to make me cry with that intro. My brother Tad Bartlett, man, it's so good to be in this room with you in this space right now. All right, so where to start? So MCU or DCU? You'll know the answer to that question, right? Are there any DC fans out there, like DC film fans? I'm just curious. Are there any Marvel film fans? Okay, I see heads nodding. Okay, that's the answer. I'm with the people. Whatever the people say, that's my answer. So yes.
Is that your answer and your why?
That's my answer. And my why is just that, man, I know this sound nerdy, but Captain America is pretty cool in those movies. Like, with the shield, he's throwing the shield on his mouth.
I'm looking for some big, narrative insight to who you are as a writer with this question. This wasn't actually a surface level question.
I want to go deeper. Response.
Yeah.
All right, here's a deep response to that. So in the history of film, there have only been maybe 3 or 4 franchises that managed to do more than 3 films or 4 films, or maybe 6 films, I don't know. But be like a cultural moment. So if we sort of go back in time, we say, all right, MCU had up to 30 films now, I think it is. And then it's like this huge cultural thing. It's like $1 billion per film. They've made $28 billion from these films, right? You go back before that, really it's just Star Wars, started in 1977, and that's like a 9-10 film series, if you're not including the animated films. That's a multi-billion-dollar thing. You go before that, you got James Bond, right? James Bond is 25, something like that films. Other than that, there's almost nothing else like that. And so I guess what I'm trying to say is this, maybe it's not your genre, maybe you're not into that kind of stuff, and even I had some resistance to some of the films, Thor the Dog World kind of sucks, they did Black Widow dirty with that whole film. But that being said, the idea that I could be somebody who walks in the theater to see the first Iron Man in 2008 or whatever it was, be like, pretty good job. And mostly it gets better with each movie. And then they somehow managed to bring all these disparate stories together. In fact, let's go even deeper than that. Let's go to the deepest level of this. So people often complain about the idea that the filmmakers keep repackaging ideas, right? And we keep them the same stories over and over again. But I want to suggest to you something I've learned in the past couple of years. So most of us don't learn very much about Greek mythology or Roman mythology. We get the Odyssey, we get the Iliad, we get some Sappho if we're lucky, a little Sappho out there. I love Sappho. But what I've learned in my studies is this. If you were a Greek person in the year 200 BC and you're going to a play, you're going to watch Antigone or something like that. You're going to watch one of Aeschylus's plays. Those plays are all built upon hundreds of years of previous plays. And so it's the exact same thing that's happening with these movies now, even the DC movies, but also the MCU movies. So to see them do that in person in front of my face since 2008 to 2023, and just get better and better and better, and bring in more crowds and bring in more audiences and make movies that are designed to appeal to kids, but also adults and men and women, different races, is really impressive to me. So as a writer, my job is not to write for everybody, but it's to understand how certain things can appeal to the community that I write for. So even the fact that Black Panther, you know, I remember when they announced Black Panther, I'm like, Marvel gonna try Black Panther? That sounds really dangerous and almost inappropriate, you know? Because that character is kind of weird. Like, people know it now, but like, Black Panther predates the actual Black Panthers, like by like a few months basically, and written by a white man. So you have a white man, 1966, writing this character called Black Panther, who's from Africa, but the writer doesn't even know like what like country or tribe he's from, and yet to be in a theater in 2018 and watch Black Panther and see an audience full of people, you know, from all over the community, even different races, having a great time, and see how well constructed it was and how specific it was. I'm like, that's what storytelling is. You're trying to take something in the moment and build upon that. And they couldn't have done that movie without the previous 10 movies, and that movie affected the next 10 movies. And so the deep answer being that all stories connected, all communities connected, and I love it. I'm a part of it. I'm not one of these people like, I'm so fancy, I can't watch MCU. I'll watch like a fancy French film, and, you know, I'll give it that. But like tomorrow night, I'm gonna watch a Japanese horror film called House, which is like a bunch of schoolgirls running around acting crazy and being attacked by demons, one of which is a Pomeranian. So that's my deep answer, bro.
All right. I appreciate that. So Maurice and I have done some version of this
like
presentation 1,000 times. We've done it for lawyers. We've done it for writers. But we've done it like just for ourselves. You know,
we did it for judges one time.
Oh, we did it for judges.
We got hailed. Judges don't ask you to do things. They command it. You can't like not.
Even when they use asking language.
We should come to our. Yes. We went to the judges' chambers, and there was like a little table, barely twice the size of this table, with like 8 judges. Just like watching us, like, all right.
The judges had a book club.
The judges had a book club,
and this was their book for that.
And they were like, talk to us about your books and your writing. And I'm just like,
what the hell am I doing here?
I'm nervous. I'm glad you were there. I couldn't have done it without you. I'd been so afraid.
All right, so I'm not sure if any of y'all know this, but this morning, Maurice was named as the 2023 winner of the Louisiana Writers Award.
Oh, good, mate. Get it on.
You got to open it up.
Kind of turn it on.
Wow.
Okay. Now, they did this at a very early point in the morning, 9 o'clock. And so
I couldn't have had like a huge crowd there. Freaked out.
He did have a very nice crowd, and he gave a very nice speech. And I was very pleased. One of the things that he did in this speech, and we're going to come back to your speech at various points in this conversation, was he quoted a Dylan Thomas poem. Not knowing that, as part of my notes for today, is that I had a different Dylan Thomas poem that I wanted to bring into the conversation. So if you'll indulge me for like 20 seconds. This is a poem, In My Craft or Soul and Art. In my craft or soul and art, exercised in the still night, when only the moon rages and the lovers lie abed with all their griefs in their arms, I labor by singing light, not for ambition or bread or the strut and trade of charms on the ivory stages, but for the common wages of their most secret heart. Not for the proud man apart from the raging moon I write on these spendthrift pages, nor for the towering dead with their nightingales and psalms, but for the lovers, their arms round the griefs of the ages, who pay no praise or wages, nor heed my craft or art.
Why you always got to raise the level of discourse like that? Let's give him a hand for that.
That's Dylan Thomas. So, that being, in the air here.
Yeah.
I don't want to get too broad here, but why do you write?
Why do I read?
Why do you write?
Every person in this country, if we're lucky, is a writer because we're taught to write, right? Like in kindergarten. And what I love to say to people who get nervous about, like they have like writer's block or they don't know like if they can get it done. I mean, I direct your attention to if you ever like talk to a 6-year-old, like ask them about their day after school and what happens, right? They're like, well, we got to school and then we went to class and Mrs. Wilson taught us and then we had ice cream for lunch and then you would believe what Sue said to me and the other, and it kind of go on and on and on and on. So that's storytelling, right? I think what happens is that part of socialization in society is to sort of funnel us into different lives, right? And for most of us, life is not to be a quote-unquote writer, not to be a storyteller. And yet, we still tell stories amongst our friends. Now, the idea to present yourself as a public writer, as somebody who is this sort of figure who writes things and puts them out to be, consumed or purchased, that's separate. But I think something I heard the other night, actually, oh yeah, the guy with the hat said this. I gotta give you credit for this. So there's a gentleman in here with a hat.
Just some random ass.
That's a random guy with a hat. So we were at LSU, and we had an event with the great Dr. Maurice Carlos Ruffin. So she had just finished reading, and we had some students in the audience, including a student. She's not my student, but she is a Senegalese-American poet. She's wonderful. Her name is Penda Smith. And they were asking questions about well, how do you keep on writing? And the guy with the hat, Neil Walsh, he said, and I actually appreciated this. I was like, all right. He said, I'm going to misquote this, paraphrase it. He said, if you want to make money as a writer, good luck with that. If you want to get fame and security as a writer, good luck with that. But the writers who actually keep going are the ones who can't help themselves, and they do it because it just feels good to do it. And I've said similar things myself many times. I have a Substack called Sitting in Silence. It's my newsletter that I've been doing for 2 years now. And the overarching, a friend of mine who is a very much more successful Substack, like what's the theme of your Substack? And I say, it's just joy. It's the joy of writing. And one thing that I try to impart to my students, and as much as possible, is this idea of yes, we have all these sort of archetypes of miserable writers who would drink too much and party too much. I'm looking at you, Hemingway and Bukowski, those guys. But they were the rare ones. Most of the writers were on their game for the most part. And so the idea of sitting down and kind of going, what a great honor to be able to write stories. Because for most of us, here's a secret that I give to my advanced students. The vast majority of writers are writing back to their own childhoods. You're thinking about what your life was like when you were 10 years old. Your parents, your grandparents, your aunties, your uncles, the neighborhood, the swing set, the pool, that kind of stuff. And that stuff kind of seeps into your writing, whether it's contemporary or not. And so for me, the joy of going back to my grandmother being alive again and taking a little bit of her essence and putting it into a character and getting that wisdom and then putting it into a book my new book, whatever like that. I mean, that's the happiest thing possible. I would give anything to sit next to her at the kitchen table, in 1989, And so to be a writer is just pulling down joy constantly, having fun with it. And, you can hear how I talk. I'm kind of goofy and I kind of paraphrase and, have little side turns and all that kind of stuff. But my personality demands that I'm always trying to find something cool. So I'm such a nerd. I'm a Virgo, so I've spent the last month constructing best of lists for myself, a best of albums that I love, top 110 albums. 'Cause I'm different, right? I did a top film list. It's top.
Wait.
Films.
Are they ranked 1 through 110, or are they just a amorphous group of 110?
I'm a Virgo, and I'm probably on the spectrum somewhere, so they're ranked. All right, buddy? So yes.
Do you have this list with you right now?
I actually have this with me right now. Yes, I do.
We'll get to that.
So I rank these things, and just going through the list gave me pleasure, and I could see how things that were higher on the list are things that have influenced my writing. So one of my little tricks of my very first book, Cast a Shadow, was if some enterprising PhD student takes this book and just goes across every single page, they'll probably find 10 references per page, to ancient British writing, into Greek mythology and Smashing Pumpkins songs and, James Bond films and that kind of stuff. I mean, it's just all throughout the entire book. And my point is, I do it not because I'm some pretentious nerd. It just gives me joy. Because the books that I read did the exact same thing. When I was a child reading, whether it was Maya Angelou or Virginia Woolf, I'm reading the book and I'm well, what did she just say there? And this is 1990, so I'd go to the library and find some.
How old were you in 1990?
Younger than you. So I had to, I think I was 13 or 14.
Virginia Woolf?
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Orlando is one of my top books. Orlando's way up there. Okay. But it's the idea of looking at something and being I don't know what that is, and then finding out what it means and going, or Nabokov, oh, he's quoting some French dude from 1780, just to bring in that flavor of it. So that brings me joy. And that's why I come back to it. If somebody said, Maurice, you can no longer use the pieces of the art that bring you joy, I wouldn't write anymore. So that answers that question, I hope.
No, that does. And it actually brings up another question related to the man in the hat. You and I both, I've followed you by a couple years, but we both went through the MFA program at the Creative Writing Workshop at the University of New Orleans. Go Privateers. Privateers? Okay.
Is that our mascot? I didn't know that.
Huh?
That's the mascot at UNO?
Privateers, yes.
What is a privateer?
I don't know, but you're giving the commencement speech in a couple of weeks, so you need to you need to get up on this.
It's a legal pirate. All right, I'm going to hire you all as speech writers for me.
All right. But back to me.
What's that?
Back to me. So first night, maybe second night in Neil's fiction workshop, probably every semester, brings in So Tolstoy is a Chekhov, some Russian dude, right? Whose big thing in this essay is that all writers need to find and write from their moral center, or said another way, have their like central project of their writing. So like of all your writing, what is your Tolstoy? What is your Tolstovian center? What is your project?
Man, I hope y'all got PhDs out there because this is a serious conversation.
These are the conversations we always have. It's not
This
that
is
serious.
true. Like, we'd be like sitting like on this patio. You have what is it, a paloopa? What is it called?
Palapa.
Palapa. He built this like hut in his backyard. We like just sit in the backyard. You're drinking whiskey. I'm like eating like a freeze pop. When we're talking about like our Tolstovian centers, it's like your daughter Lucy runs around chasing the cat.
Yes.
Okay. So
You're delaying the answer.
because there's like squirrels in here. They're like a little hamster wheel, and they're like working really hard to get the engine rolling. My Tolstoy book, it's actually changed. Like when my first.
Wait a
book,
second. Is that legal? Can his Tolstovian center change? Okay. All right. Go ahead. All right.
Wonderful. I feel much better now. I was getting nervous. My first book when I wrote it, in some sense, so I remember. So I'm the kind of nerd who loves, again, like one of my themes is joy, but also eclecticism, different things, just liking like how I love people make things, and I love that so much. So on the one hand, I'm like raised in my house listening to like Mahalia Jackson and Jimi Hendrix, but I also love like the Beach Boys, right? And I remember when somebody asked Brian Wilson, the lead singer and like primary genius from the Beach Boys, which is like one of the nerdiest groups of all time, right? Not as cool as like the Beatles or whatever, Rolling Stones. Thank you. He said, "It's like Brian, like why'd you make Pet Sounds like one of the greatest albums of all time?" And he said, "This was a love letter to my teenage self. I'm trying to talk back to myself." He was so young; he's like 23 years old, right? When he made it, he's like, "I'm talking to like my 14-year-old self." So this book is like me looking at myself as this sort of nerdy, chubby. I had like a flat top, but it wasn't like even because my dad did it. And God love him. And like that kid, like what would he like if he had this book when he was 14? He would have went crazy. He'd been like, "Our brother wrote this," and like it's quoting all these different like artists and like movies and stuff like that. So that was the task here, was to think about like my community and then tie them like to like the things that I love so much, and just mix it together and like put it in the oven at 400 for like an hour and see what came out. But then I changed, which is weird because this book was actually started. My second book started even before the first book. And I think what I didn't realize I was doing until my editor said, "So, Maurice, you're putting the short story collection out. What's the theme of it?" And I'm like, my first response was I didn't want a theme, because one of the people that I enjoy reading is a writer named Wells Tower, who had a book called Everything Ravaged, Everything Burned, which just blew my mind, because the style in short story collections for the past 30 years, started with Junot Diaz, Amy Bender, and a few other writers, and A.M. Holmes, who I love their writing so much, was that you have these linked story collections, even like Sherwood Anderson, like 100 years ago, who was a guy who was in New Orleans, for example. But when I read Wells Tower collection, everything ravaged, everything burned has a story in it that's about Vikings in the year 1300, told in the voice of people from Jersey Shore. Like, not even like Ashford, New Jersey, like just that specific reality TV show voice is in their voice. I'm like, this dude is wild. And every single story was as different from each story as the other story. So that's like my initial goal with this book. But then I was like, editor, Nicole Counts, my brilliant editor at One Room, I'm like, I'm not sure what the theme is. And she's like, "Well, is the theme New Orleans?" I'm like, "Yes, that's it. Theme is New Orleans." Obviously. I knew that the entire time. So this is 19 stories that are all set in New Orleans by New Orleans people. The vast majority of them are African-American. There's a few other characters as well in here, but that was the theme there. But then another friend of mine, Jamie Attenberg, who was a Brooklynite who moved to New Orleans about a decade ago, who's a wonderful writer and like friend and mentor, who's written like 7 or 8 books. She has a new one coming out in a few months. We're doing an event at Baldwin & Company in January. That's a lot of commas there, isn't it? Jamie,
I think they were M-dashes, really.
You would know this. You're a great editor. She said to me one day, like, how your friends like sort of read you for Philip, but like without being mean. She was like, "So you wrote this book. It's pretty good, but like try writing like a humble book for a change." I'm like, "What does that even mean, a humble book?" And it's one of those things where you're like, "Dad, whatever, friend, whatever you said, I'm gonna write my next book." So I started writing my next book, and I remember just thinking about like once somebody says that to you, you can't unhear it. It's like this. There's a movie Inception with Leonardo DiCaprio and all them, where it's like you can like get in somebody's dream and affect their dream, and they just can't change their fate from that point. And so in some weird way, that little bitty nugget from Jamie Attenberg makes this book, which is totally not about me at all. Like, again, this is 14-year-old nerdy me. This is about like all my ancestors and all my community and all of their different adventures and what was important to them. And this is like this is an homage. It's a gift. It's an offering. And so my Tolstoyan center now, I guess, is this idea of looking outward rather than inward and trying to say, you know, what are the untold stories? What are the new angles of approach? And what can I create that, like, if they saw it themselves, they would go, you know, my 1870s great times 8 auntie, she would go, oh, that was a good book you wrote, you know, Descendant, that kind of thing. So that's my new center right now, is writing the people I care about and wanting them to kind of be an audience going like, nice job.
Did you have to look inward before you could look outward?
I think so.
Like, is this book necessarily an outgrowth of these books?
Yes, I had to get this off my chest. That's what this was. Yeah. This was like just me being like a little frustrated, but also like, you know, hopeful and being like, let me just say what I got to say and like hold no bars and, you know, knock over a few tables like Jesus with the money changers in the synagogue, you know, in the temple, whatever like that, and then see what is remaining after that. So, yes, absolutely.
All right, do me a favor.
Yeah?
With no commentary or annotation, can you just give us the top 10 off your music list?
I might get in trouble from this. There's no porn on this list, I don't think. Somebody laughed.
It's not something we laugh about anymore.
It's hard times. All right, let's see. All right, what we on top? What's your list? I got movies, films, books. I'm still working on with.
Musicians.
Cool, musicians. All right, so, all right, it's the top 52 albums list.
I just want 10, the top 10.
This is my weirdest list, actually.
Well, that's why I asked for this.
Why'd you ask for this one?
Because I know you.
Like my book list has like Toni Morrison and like Mike.
Yeah, no.
I got some weird music tastes. All right, let's see. Music list. All right. So we started this session by playing a Smashing Pumpkins song today because we like, that's one of our bonding points. Yeah, but he likes.
It's also one of our division points.
He likes the wrong album as his favorite album.
He likes the wrong album.
So my number one album on my list, I'm just going to run through it. So number one album is Melancholy and Infinite Sadness by Smashing Pumpkins. Number two is the guy who we can't even say his name anymore because he got excommunicated last year for the Adidas debacle. That album is My Beautiful Dark Fantasy. The third album is that guy stopped me in the hall. It's like, you were talking about this last night. I want to talk to you about it. It's by a band with a weird name. They call the Flaming Lips. And the album is called At War with the Mystics, which is their response to these weird Oklahoma rockers about the Bush administration.
I said no annotations.
You did say that.
Yes.
You know, the other brothers don't listen to what their older brothers say. All right. Let me keep going. Sorry. The 4 is Divers by Joanna Newsom, a harp player. 5 is Vespertine by the Icelandic singer Bjork. 6 is another Flaming Lips album, Soft Bulletin. Number 7 is Pet Sounds by the Beach Boys. Already named that. Number 8 is another Smashing Pumpkins album, not your favorite, called Siamese Dream. 9 is Smile by the Beach Boys. And then 10 is Deserter Song by Mercury Rev.
Very interesting. And then bonus, what's 11?
Ease by Joanna Newsom.
All right. I just want to leave that there.
You're just gonna like leave that?
I just want to leave that hanging out there. There might be a question.
I love your yellow jacket and blue bow tie combination. You just be stepping out every time.
All right. So
we're IG friends now. I saw his page. It's like all these different fits that he's wearing like throughout history. It's incredible.
So here's the thing about you, Maurice. One of the things. You are an incredible writer.
Yeah.
You don't need me to tell you that because a lot of people tell you that.
You can say it again though.
You are.
I really appreciate what
you are an incredible writer. But the thing about you that I think to me makes you stand out above other writers moves away from your writing, and that's the way you uplift the writers and the community around you. Like, just go back to your speech this morning. Your speech had nothing to do with you. Your speech was, first it was all about Ernest Gaines, and then it was dedicated to, you brought in all the other Louisiana Writer Awards winners who were there to have a picture, and your speech was structured around basking in the work they had done. You mentioned the future Louisiana Writer Award winner, your student, Kyler Carter.
Right there. Let's give a hand to LSU students in the house.
You brought in Charisma Price, your twin, the incredible poet. and you are always making, an event that could have and should have been, glorifying you and the incredible writer you are about uplifting people around you. Speak to why, if you don't mind, why this is such a central part of, it seems like a central part of who you are as a writer is the uplifting of writing. I mean, I've felt that you have uplifted me many times. So I'm a personal beneficiary of it, but I want you to, why is this such a key part of everything you do?
Something that Tad is not saying is that he's uplifted me also. Because if I had not met you in 2005, is that what it was?
Mm-hmm.
If I had not met you in 2005, this would have been an impossible journey.
Now, see, you're doing it. You're doing it. This is like a meta answer, right? But go ahead.
But it's the truth. It's the truth. I mean, look, okay, you know how they say like you're standing on the shoulders of somebody? So they're like, this is a really bad metaphor. I'm not always a good writer. I have to like draft things out to keep reworking it. But like imagine I'm standing on the shoulders, right? One foot's on this shoulder, one foot's on that shoulder. On this shoulder, what I'm standing on is my ancestors. It's like my grandmother and everybody that sort of created me, literally. Like the hundreds or thousands of people that, like in my bloodline and in my community, which includes a lot of people from all across the planet. And then the other side is like my friends and mentors, people that I've met over the years who were like I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. It like, no, you know what you're doing. Or you're going to be all right. You don't know what you're doing right now, but give it a couple years. That's happened to me over and over and over and over again. And then, and maybe this is why Bjork is like number 2 or 3 on that list of albums, whatever like that. She has this one line in one of her songs I love so much. She says, when in doubt, give. Such a great line. She sings it with that amazing voice, like the super high note, and she's like playing the piano or the harp, something like that. So like my whole theory of the case, lawyers and all that, there's some lawyers out there too, I know, is that, life is so much easier when you got a squad around you. Life is easier when you're giving rather than taking. Life is easier when you're trying to share like joy and smiles versus being like, everything sucks. And there's that weird meme, you might've seen the meme. This is one of those moments. I've had no coffee yet, but there's a meme with a guy in like a train, and he's like riding the train. There's like one guy on the left side looking out into like this beautiful like sunset, and there's the other guy looking at a wall with like rocks, right? And the guy on the right is looking saying, life is terrible, life sucks. And the guy on the left is saying, life is very nice. I love life so much. And they're like in the exact same train, going to the exact same destination. We get to decide how we want to respond to life. How do we want to move through the world? Whether you deal with wonderful things like the birth of a child or making a lot of money, or bad things like health issues or being treated wrongly by somebody you work with, our responses really make our life what it is. And so I made a decision years ago, thanks in part to our friend, our beloved friend who passed, Terry Shrum, who we had these talks about like, when you look in the mirror, what do you see? Well, I want to see a smile in the mirror. Like even on a bad day, like I can accept like pain and dealing with that and processing it, but also like, you know what? It doesn't matter if I broke my leg. I'm going to try to be a better person even within that situation versus being mean-spirited. So when you say like, why'd I do what I do constantly, it's because, I could look, if you guys were insane enough to be in here for like 5 hours, I can give you a timeline. Every single time somebody helped me in my life as both a writer and a person in general, I'll give you like one very simple example. We were talking about a guy I haven't seen in years. His name is Vincent Solution. I was at NWP for my very first time, 2011, I think it was, in D.C., and I'm like this little lost guy walking around, and Vince and somebody else walked up to me, and they were like, "You from Louisiana?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like, man, what school you go to? UNO, grad school. Hang with us for a little while. So I'm like, hang with Vince and his buddy for like, in the next 30 minutes. We go to like a panel together. We see the panel together. I leave. I'm like, I don't feel so alone. And then about an hour after that, I'm standing like in the hotel lobby, and my friend Jamie Hadley here said, "Hey, if you see these 2 writers, just say hello to these 2 guys." So I walk over and say hello to these 2 dudes. And the writers are Matt Johnson, Matt, and Victor Laval. And I just kind of say, "Hey guys, my friend Jamie from Memphis said, tell you hello." And they're like, "Oh, well, who are you?" I'm like, "Maurice Ruffin." I'm getting ready to walk away, and they're like, "No, you're not." It's 11 o'clock at night, and I'm like, "Guys, I got to go get some sleep." They're like, "No, you don't." And so for the next 6.5 hours, we went to, I had just read a book by a writer named Daniel Evans, a wonderful short story writer. Her book is called Before You Suffocate Your Own Fool Self. I read the book. Matt's like, "Hey, let's go over to this apartment for like a couple of hours." We go to the apartment. It's Danielle's apartment. So we're in the apartment, leave the apartment, come back to the hotel. We go to like this suite. There was an Amazon suite at the conference. It's the Amazon author suite. Who heard of such thing? In the Amazon suite is ZZ Packer, Colson Whitehead. I'm thinking like 4 people were in there. I'm like this unknown, unpublished writer with all of them, plus Matt Johnson and Victor Laval. They're my mentors, right? Now get this, I'll close in this part for this answer. Victor Laval, who's been writing at least for 20 years now, if not more, he has a TV show just came out. It's called The Changeling. It's on, I think, Apple Plus. It's doing very well, it's very successful. His mentor is Percival Everett. Percival Everett is like from the previous 10, 20 years. He taught those two guys. His movie is called American Fiction, starring Jeffrey Wright. It already won Best Film, like audience favorite at the 10th Film Festival in New York City. I can almost guarantee it's going to be nominated for Oscars and probably going to win something, probably, right? That's their mentor. Then also Matt Johnson himself, you may have heard of a TV show called Fall of the House of Usher. He wrote episode 4 of it. That's my guys. That's just one example. I could give you 28,000 examples. And meanwhile, they're like, and then the last thing, I remember the 2 years that year, I'm sitting at lunch with Matt. It's him. There's this amazing writer named, I can't think of her name. She was an editor sitting with us, and his editor, Chris Jackson, my current editor-in-chief. And Matt comes, he's like, Maurice, you doing all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine, man. He's like, Maurice, you know you're next in line, right? I'm like, what does that mean? He's like, there's a line of people doing what we've been doing. You are next in line. And what that implies is that the people behind me who are also next in line. And therefore, I have a duty to make sure that the path is open, that the ladder has been lowered, and if they need a hand up to the rooftop, I'm there for them. That's what I got to do.
All right. I want to go back to your speech from this morning. You mentioned Darryl Bork line, his aim is truth, speaking about you and your writing. Mm-hmm. Oh, wait. Jim said that wasn't from your speech. That was from Jim's speech. But then in your speech, you said lies are complicated, truth is simple. Mm-hmm. And I think it is not unfair to characterize your books as albeit fiction, about the truth, right? How simple is it really to get to the truth and then to make that truth appear on a page?
Well, I think that I love humans, and so I try to study everything. I mean, personally, I'm a Christian, but I've studied Buddhism, for example. And so the principle behind Buddhism is that you got to stop fighting yourself. You got to stop centering yourself. You must look outward into the people around you in order to create something. And so the great Buddhist parable of Buddha himself is, he is this prince, he's kind of self-centered, he's kind of a badass, and one day the people in his village say, hey Prince, look, there's a monster in the forest. You're our best. Go out there and fight this monster. He's like, okay, I got you. I'm bad, right? So the prince gets his sword, gets his knife, gets his bow and arrow, gets a couple other weapons, goes out into the woods, sees the monster in the woods and starts like shooting arrows at him, slinging things. Doesn't even nick the monster. The monster doesn't feel anything. Then the monster says, are you done? Prince says, yeah. And the monster just tears him to shreds, just beats him to the ground. Says, hey, Prince, I don't feel too good, does it? Prince says, the monster walks away. Prince kind of goes, well, that didn't go too well. He starts praying. And he basically asks for an answer to how to protect his people from this monster that's in the woods. And the answer he receives is, it's not about weapons. It's not about technique. It's not about power in order to defeat evil. It's about belief. It's about honor. It's about wholesomeness and walking in truth. And so he gets up, he's healing a little bit, he dusts himself off, he doesn't have any swords, he's barehanded. He walks into the woods, faces the monster, and without throwing a single blow, defeats the monster. And that's the birth of Buddhism from 3,000 years ago. When it comes to writing, this book was harder for me because I was fighting myself a little bit. Not too much. I mean, I was able to, sort of get the anxiety and depression and weird stuff down to the level where I could make the book. But the reason why this was so much easier to write, I said in the first session, this book took 41 years to write, all told, all right? This book took about 7 months to write, right? The reason why is because at that point, it's not me fighting myself. It's not me pushing against anything. It's just me listening. It's like, what y'all got to say? Oh, really? Word? And just keep doing it. So I'm not saying like the book was quote unquote easy to write, but I'm saying it wasn't a struggle because I had the support of, for lack of a better word, the voices in my head, and then the stories I've been told and the people I've seen and the things that I've learned over time. And at that point, it's almost like printing free money. It's not me doing the work. Look, I see guys like, building highways in the summertime or like people like working in like hog factories. My ancestors, on my dad's side, my great-grandmother had a slaughterhouse. That's hard work. This is just being an artist, which is about being open and taking that energy and then taking the mirror and just sending the energy back out to the universe.
Right. You know, and as you say about your first book, there is a lot of sort of fighting yourself.
Still learning, yeah.
And I think that's probably a common. I didn't mess it up, did I?
No. You reminded me of something.
That seems to be, I think, a common thing for writers, right? Is we have to fight against ourselves, you know, scrape away our own artifices, you know, our own self-defenses. Do you feel like once you accomplish that the first time, they didn't like callous back up, you were able to just continue forward? Or?
Well, that's work too.
Yeah.
You know, Kiese Lehman, my great other brother, you know, genius, MacArthur genius, I can't even talk. MacArthur Genius Grant recipient, Kiese Lehman, a writer from Mississippi, from Jackson, who has like been a mentor to me also. Somebody else who's raised me up over and over again. He talks about this, how brilliant Kiese is. This is from a Facebook post. He said this. He was like, you know what? We fight battles, we lose. We fight battles, we win. Sometimes the scars from the battles you win are worse than the ones you lose. And you have a duty to yourself to figure out how to heal those things, whether it's through therapy or going to church or talking to your family. So I have made a conscious effort to not let the old scars be a hindrance. But you remind me of something that I forgot. Remember I mentioned about 20 minutes ago that if you took a PhD student to like analyze my book, on every page you find something, I told the story of Buddha just now, right? From 3,000 years ago. This is page 1 of my book. I was dressed as a Roman centurion. I had rented the mega deluxe option, no expense spared, a full tunic of lamb's wool, leather sandals, and 5 Hollywood-grade prop weapons, a sword, a javelin, a bow and arrow, a shield, and a dagger. I never knew that Roman soldiers used daggers, but the costume guy assured me that they too did use daggers, the dagger being the preferred weapon of choice for when shit got real, which apparently happened from time to time. Now, I stole this history of Buddha from 3,000 years ago and put it in the first page of my novel. Forgot about that. It's all connected for me, you know.
And speaking of all connected, and turning back to Kyler and
5 minutes.
Yes, 5 minutes. Your other students. I think this might be the most important question. We've known a number of writers who support their writing habits by teaching, and many of them seem to be not. The man in the hat's gone.
We ran them off.
The man in the hat's not one of these people, but some of them do seem.
Like Curious George's dad name?
Yeah, no, he had a yellow hat. He was the man in the yellow hat.
Not a yellow suit, but a yellow hat.
Right.
Where's the hat, bro? Okay. I'm sure it's very nice.
What I want to get to is you do not only not seem to not resent teaching to support yourself as a writer. You seem to feast on it and thrive off of it. It seems to give you, and this might be related to your whole thing. I mean, you do like to give back, right? You like to support, but speak not as a writer, but as a teacher, you know, what writing means to you as a teacher.
Well, it's in my DNA.
Right.
My grandmother, Louise Hearns, was a teacher her entire life. She taught English and she taught special ed. She's the one that when I had a reading problem at 12 years old, I spent the summer at her house. She bought me a stack of books, like 15 books from B. Dalton. Remember B. Dalton? And I read the books and she made me do little book reports to her. And by the end of that summer, whatever problem I had was gone, like within 3 months, right? So I experienced firsthand the power of somebody caring enough to teach you, right? And then I had mentors who are writers and teachers who would tell me about how, you know, I'm teaching, I could like only write like during the Christmas break in the summertime. I'm like, man, that sounds terrible that you can only write when you have the extra time. And one thing, look, I don't think I'm the smartest person on the planet, but I'm a good mimic and I'm a good improviser. And so I think for me, coming into this idea of being a teacher, not only 4 years ago, is like, all right, I know what I'm going to face. How can I adapt my life to fit that experience? And there's also Terrence Hayes, who is Chris's mentor. Terrence Hayes, the poet, who's also won National Book Award and a Genius Grant. He said that his job is to, yes, like not allow it to stifle his writing, but also to be present for his students at all times, to not like miss classes and that sort of thing. So I take those things to heart. And I realized when I was at Grisham House as the Grisham Writer in Residence at Ole Miss, when everything was on Zoom, being in that period of being almost totally alone. I'm in this like old mansion in the woods by myself on Zoom with my students, and they were so caring and giving to each other and to me also. And like sitting down when I'm writing this book here and feeling like, I feel better than I thought an hour before I started talking to these students. And how wonderful is that? If you treat them well, they treat you well. Imagine that. And so I'm just like, I'm like getting this energy, and their stories are so good. I'm learning about craft. I'm like, I couldn't do that before I read this story, but now I can. And so those things together make it good for me as a writer and as a teacher, right?
Let's spend the last couple of minutes, and I meant to spend more minutes in this, but I want to open it up to questions from the audience.
This is not a question, but it's a comment. T.S. Eliot wrote that essay, Tradition and the Individual Talent, where he talks about all these writers having a conversation through their works. When I read your books, I hear you having that conversation.
Oh, thank you. What's your name?
And I know this is it.
What?
Yes.
You know Vincent Solution. Well, thank you, Alyssa, for that. And to that point, I meant to say this earlier. Not only, so she was saying how we're all connected as writers, right? Through the past. It is so real. I had the privilege to go to Senegal, my first time on the continent, right? I was there in August for an entire month. And to hear the stories being told, you know, both orally, in writing, through music, through food, and to see how it was, I'm a New Orleanian. It's the same story. Here's a specific example. At Congo Square, where Black folks have gathered for 300 plus years, in the French, right outside the French Quarter, right? If you go there on a certain Sunday, you're gonna see people dancing. And they're like wearing all white, and they're like, you know, paying their respects to the ancestors, right? I played one of those videos for my host in Dakar, Senegal. You know what they said? That's our dances. We made that dance. It's the same dance. It's the same stories. And so for me, there is no separation, and there's great power in that versus feeling like you're separated and isolated. That's what community is. That's where hope comes from. Yeah.
Okay.
Maurice, what you had to say about the interlocked, interlinking nature of cultural references on Carol earlier a lot. I was curious, you guys opened this particular conversation by describing the differences between the DCU and the Marvel Cinematic Universe, the MCU. My question to you is, are you trying in your body of work to create the MCR?
All right, and for the sake of time, I'm going to combine questions. Thank you, Dr. Ben Morris. Kyler, what's your question?
Similar to them, I was wondering how you narrow down the multitude and sort of infinite sources of inspiration in your world and in your community to produce works that are
Ooh, y'all are good. All right, so this is the closing answer to these wonderful questions, and thank you for being here, your presence. Yes, then to answer your question briefly, I'm trying to create an MCRU, absolutely. Look, the books have been optioned. Maybe it'll happen like as a TV show or a movie, something like that, but even more just like for me as an artist. Again, it's all connected. I don't want to keep banging that same drum. But look, so here's a little secret. This book comes out February the 27th. This is a book about a bunch of Black ladies and girls in the 1850s who get together to form a spy ring to sabotage the Confederates, right? Now, I wrote this at Ole Miss when I was at the Grisham House. But guess what? It's not the entire story. When I was there over that 8-month period, well, the first 4 months I had writer's block. In the 5th month, I started writing this book. At the end of 4 more months, I had 600 pages. The other 300 pages is this lady in World War II. She's young, like 17 years old, and she's going off to war to be with the WACs and fight on behalf of the community, right? And then the last part is set in the year, the 400th anniversary of New Orleans, 21/8/18 in the future, right? So guess what? It's all the same family. It's all the same ladies. So that being said, is it my universe? My name's on it, but it's their stories. So thank you all so much. I appreciate you.
Tad Bartlett.
Maurice.